Now, focusing only on the biggest star in our sport, McGregor did his rounds of media to support the show. McGregor said he's aiming to make, quote, the greatest return in combat sports. But let's start off with the UFC president's comments on this topic. He's not making it sound like this is necessarily a slam dunk.
First of all, Conor called me a couple days ago and loved the first episode of The Ultimate Fighter and saying how happy he was that he was a part of it. And I think being here in the environment and everything else, he felt it again and felt like he wants to get back and fight. The one thing that you guys have to understand is this kid has so much money. It's like Habib now. It's like these guys got shitloads of money. And it's hard to, it's hard to reel these guys back in and get them fired up to get in a fight.
Now, I'm sure the three of you have seen, the interviews that McGregor's done, and now you've heard from White. After hearing all this, that proverbial stock, that McGregor stock that we always like to joke about, is it hot? Is it cold? Guys, are you buying or are you selling at this point? We're going to go to Danny first.
I'm selling. I mean, things are not looking good, right? Like, we'll see in a year, maybe more, but as of now, one fighter looks like they're training for a fight, the other doesn't. Obviously, Michael Chandler, just scroll past his Instagram, he's at the gym. Conor McGregor is watching the F1 race in Monaco, right? I believe. And even just stuff prior, like he just seems to be partying and enjoying his life, which again, I'm not going to criticize him for it, but if your intention is to come back, those activities probably don't align with your purpose. So, you see that, then you kind of, see some interviews with Michael Chandler where, he's kind of saying, oh, if he doesn't fight me, this is going to stain his legacy, kind of like putting a threat on him or putting pressure to get a deal done. We still don't know when they're going to fight. Then you hear those comments from Dana White. I'm not sure he's going to come back. I really don't. And I think Dana White on this occasion with those comments, he's on point about it. I mean, we saw what happened to McGregor the last time he stepped in the cage where he literally snapped his leg in half. I mean, and he said it in a tweet, months after where, pulling himself out of the USADA pool to do whatever he needed to do so he can not even just make a return, but be able to run around with his kids in the future and whatnot. Every time you step in there, you could lose an eye. A lot of things can happen, right? Even death, right? Like that's always in the cards as well. This is a dangerous sport and he has so much to lose. He's got a family, he's got health, he's got wealth, famous. I mean, in a way, it doesn't make sense for him to return, right? Unless it's just for his own pleasure, for his own purpose, right? So, yeah, we'll see if he comes back or not. But part of me is very skeptical that he will even make a return, given everything that I mentioned.
All right, we'll probably come back to you, Danny, because I got some follow-ups. Spada, how about you? McGregor stock, you buying or selling?
It's tough because the whole thing comes down to, for me right now, is USADA, right? Like, why isn't he re-entering the testing pool? That's the thing that people want to hear. That's the thing when people hear, whether he gets an exemption or not, we just want to hear that he's back in the USADA testing pool because he needs to do that regardless. And we haven't heard that yet. I think that's the biggest problem here. And in terms of McGregor, and he mentioned something, about having the greatest comeback in the history, I think him competing and just looking good would be a comeback. Obviously, if he wins, that in itself for him will be a massive win. Even if people think, oh, Michael Chandler is perfectly tailored for him stylistically, blah, 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 blah. The fact is that a lot of people still want to fight him. He's still being called out by all the champions. They could easily build up a fight with him and anyone. People are acknowledging that he could leapfrog, even Beneil Dariush when I spoke to him recently. So I think for Conor, just fighting Michael Chandler would make it one of the greatest comebacks because we've seen this type of injury and what it's done to people. Anderson Silva is a huge example. Chris Weidman isn't back yet. So coming back from an injury like that is hard in itself. I just need to see him back in the USADA testing pool for me to believe, okay, we're one step closer. When the fight happens, I don't think McGregor really cares. I know Michael Chandler really wants that fight, but he seems like he's willing to wait. For McGregor, whether, yes, we've got November and December, we've got MSG, and we've got Vegas, is supposed to be T-Mobile Arena. But for Conor, does it really matter? November, December, January? I mean, the UFC want him back as soon as possible, sure. But I think we just need to see him back in the testing pool before I could, decide whether we're going to see him back or not. I just don't know what's taking so long.
Yeah, and to top it off, McGregor even told Olivi he wants 3 or 4 fights. It's so confusing. The chat room's blowing up. They're discussing why isn't there a date. Some are saying that they're going to announce it during the show. They're teasing you. They're bringing you along. but still in the past, we kind of had an idea by now. And you're right, Potter, that USADA deal, we got to know that first. All right, Mike Bond, weigh in, please.
There's a lot to unpack here, obviously. The whole thing, I think Farah nailed the USADA stuff. Like, that is the first step that we need to go forward. They put out that statement, almost over 2 weeks ago at this point, saying that his re-entry was imminent, and they had conversations with him about filing paperwork. And here we are, beginning of June, still nothing showing up in the database as far as him, getting tests or being in there and stuff. So that's a red flag. This quote that we're working this topic around, the greatest comeback in combat sports, you got to keep in mind that interview with Conor and Megan O'Leary was recorded, I believe, right when he got to the Apex and started filming The Ultimate Fighter. So that is quite dated at this point, and he's been through, whatever he's been through since then. I think we just got to keep it real here, right? Like, obviously, anyone who has been tracking Conor McGregor's behavior closely enough through interviews on social media and beyond in recent years, there's some level of skepticism in your mind if he's going to come back and fight again, right? Like, you don't know for sure. He can say that he is as mentally in the game as he's ever been and that he's still passionate about the sport. And I do believe that to a degree, but it is one thing to say all that. It's an entirely different challenge to go through the obstacles he needs to go through. You saw it at a training camp. I don't know if any of you guys watched that documentary you put out on Netflix. It recapped 3 fights, I believe, throughout his career, and some of the most recent ones. And he had a really tough time getting through training camp for every single one of those. So he turns 35 next month, I believe, July 14th or something. So there's a lot of things here that you can raise an eyebrow to and be like, is this thing really going to happen? I want it to happen. I think when Conor McGregor is wanting to fight and mentally checked in, it's for the betterment of all of us, for the betterment of the sport, the industry. He raises the tide for, all the boats and stuff like that. And it's a good thing. But right now, you just have to show us something, right? Like, right now, all he's showing us is just tweets that are, you can read into them however you want to. He's doing some interviews and stuff, but we haven't seen the real action that we need to see from him as far as a UFC comeback. And I think that is what, relates to Dana White's comments, which I think we'll get a little more into. I mean, I was sitting there listening to him on Saturday night speak about Conor, and it was like, he's talking about this guy as if he's a thing of the past at this point, saying, we can find new stars and we're, looking forward. There's plenty of people who want to be Conor McGregor in this company. That doesn't sound like a promoter who's confident he is coming back in the immediate future. So right now, I can't sit here with any degree of confidence saying that he's going to fight again.
Mike, as you were talking, I summoned cold coffee and this future award-winning video guy. I'm telling you, he comes through. We got that quote for you. This is Dana White at the post-fight press conference for UFC on Vegas 46.
I never get concerned. You know what I mean? Listen, when guys show, we have a massive roster of people that want to come in and people that are ready to fight and people that want to be Conor McGregor, and be at that level. It's like for the last 20 years, everybody said, oh my God, what are you guys going to do when Chuck Liddell retires? You guys are fucked. Oh my God, GSP, Anderson Silva, this and that. This is a professional sport. People come in here, they achieve great things, and they retire. You know what I mean? You can never worry about that type of stuff. It is what it is. It's part of the game. It's my job and my team's job to find new talent and build them and take them to that level.
Ooh, yeah. That does seem like maybe we're getting prepped for something. All right.
John Morgan asked him 3 times, pretty much point blank, our former colleague, are you concerned? What's the status of this fight? And he completely danced around it. So, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to kind of read into that. I think maybe some of the concerns are seeping into Dana and the UFC's minds as well.
All right. So let me ask you guys this. This is a fill in the blank. Remember those back in the day? Again, we'll go Danny fought on Mike. Guys, if Conor McGregor never fought in the UFC again, I would feel fill in the blank. Danny?
Bit disappointed, to be honest. If you just go back, and for those fans that started watching MMA and the UFC post-pandemic, if you just go back to that time that he became a double champion and defeated Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor was one of the world's best at that point in time. What he was doing was just brutal, was just, it almost had a feeling the same as Anderson Silva when he was in his prime, where you go, there's no way he can pull this off. And he would do it in a way that just kind of felt special, felt magical, right? And that over the years, especially after the Eddie Alvarez fight, and after he started making a bunch of money, began to fade away to the point that, a lot of people make fun of Conor McGregor and kind of poke at him and kind of sometimes even treat him as a meme. But people forget this dude was a serious talent, one of the best fighters I've ever seen when, 100% on. So part of me would be disappointed because, yes, I know he's had, some injuries and whatnot. But I do feel like at least on this stage of his career, he's kind of underperformed. And if he were to retire, I would feel like it'd be a premature retirement. Again, I wouldn't blame him for it because of the things that I mentioned, minutes ago. But still, I just feel like he could have gone so much farther if maybe, certain distractions and money, frankly, probably didn't take his focus away from fighting.
Yeah, chat room, you can chime in as well. Nelly Morris is saying he or she would feel robbed. Plata, how would you feel if Conor McGregor? So yeah, if Conor McGregor never fought in UFC again, I would feel. Go ahead.
Yeah, robbed's not a bad word. I mean, robbed or just weird because it seems like we've been gearing for his return, the Netflix documentary, The Ultimate Fighter, all these things that are building towards Conor's greatest comeback. He's coming off of the injury and stuff like that. So it would feel weird that after all of that, like kind of anticlimactic, I should say, that after all that, we just don't even see him fight. So it would be weird, especially that we're building towards it. He is the sport's biggest star. It's anytime we lose a star that's that big. Obviously, McGregor's the biggest of them all. It's kind of sad as well. And I know he talks about his motivation to fight, and it's not for the money. Obviously, he doesn't need the money. But it just seems like we've been building, because sometimes when fighters are hurt or we haven't seen them or suspended or whatever, there isn't that big buzz or people aren't talking about it. Now, of course, Conor does a great job by tweeting and all the time and commenting and beefing with certain fighters. But it's also like, just as I mentioned before, the Netflix documentary, The Ultimate Fighter, it would be weird to not see him compete after all of this.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mike, let's go to you. If Conor McGregor never fought in the UFC again, I would feel.
Yeah, I think it's unfulfilled is the word, right? And I think that's just a twist on what Danny and Farah both said there. I don't have a ton much more to add, right? Like, it's either going to happen or it's not. Danny laid it out. He was extraordinary in those years from like 2014 to 2016. And then, the Floyd Mayweather fight happened and he won, right? He won the game. He got an enormous payday. He was a 2-division champion. He did everything you could do, reached heights higher than many people in the sport could ever dream of achieving. So like, no one is going to sit here and say that, like disrespect him in that regard. He changed the game for all of us, for this entire industry. But this back half, these recent years, it's kind of spoke for itself, right? Like, not much competition. The times he has fought, it's been some rough outings, mostly losses. Only one win in this decade, and that was against Donald Cerrone in a very quick fight, and he was coming off a losing skid, multiple losses and stuff. So I don't think this back half of the career in these recent years really are a depiction of Conor McGregor's best. And I'm sure he's dreaming that, there's better stuff coming on the horizon and he can get back to form and stuff. But there is a lot of obstacles in his way from a health perspective, from a competition perspective. Michael Chandler is not a layup fight for him by any stretch of the imagination if they do get in there. As we kind of said earlier, right? Like, he is working his ass off every day. You see it in the gym against absolute killers in one of the best training camps in the entire world. And Conor McGregor, is shadow boxing on his yacht and stuff like that. So it's an uphill climb for him at this point, but we'll see what happens going forward. As I said earlier, for the betterment of our industry, like, I hope he does fight. It's a good time when Conor McGregor is acting and it's for the best, but yeah, I just don't know if it's going to happen.